What's good, everybody? It's your boy Sunny, and I'm back again with another episode of Sunny Talk. And on today's episode, I'm here with a very special guest. I'm here with Mystic Mark from the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast and a whole bunch of other podcasts, I believe. What's up, Mark?
Yeah, what's up? Glad to be here. My family thinks I'm crazy is my main podcast, but you're right. I do have other shows and I work for the Tinfoil Hat podcast. So people might be more familiar with that show, super popular. Sam Tripoli and all the amazing things he's doing. I help him find guests for the show and make sure that they're all prepared and scheduled to record episodes. So yeah, that's what I do, and I've been podcasting since I think 2020 was when
Hmm.
I started my show. Right a few months after the whole, you know,
Pandemic
what
or
hit the
whatever, yeah.
fan.
Oh, yeah,
so,
sorry, yeah.
but
Well, so Mark, on this show, I like to start from the beginning, but before we start there, could you well, you gave us a little brief summary of who you are. Any other let them know exactly all the places they can find you. So
cool.
yeah, let's just get that out the rip.
Yeah, my family
Hmm.
thinks I'm crazy.com is my website, and there you could go and see all the different, avenues to find my work, whether it's the podcasts and the apps to listen to it on, or my Patreon, my Substack. Maybe we'll be talking a little bit about that because I've been
Hmm.
writing some articles on my Substack, and yeah, so there's a ton of places people can go, but mainly my family thinks I'm crazy wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, great. All right, so Mark, so on this show, we like to start from the beginning and then build our way towards the present day. So where were you born and raised?
I'm from Connecticut, and I'm from outside of New Haven, Connecticut, to be more specific.
Hmm. Okay, so growing up in New Haven, Connecticut, that name is so familiar to me. I feel like there's something that happened in that town or in that area that I always hear about New Haven, Connecticut.
Oh, I'm
But
sure
gr
you hear about it. You're in New York City. New Haven and New York have definitely had a particularly interesting relationship. People often think that the tri-state is like New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. No, it's not. It's New York, Connecticut, and New
Right.
Jersey. And
Yeah,
we're that other corner of the triangle that gets forgotten. But yeah, New
yeah.
Haven's got the best pizza. They've also got Yale University.
Mhm. Oh,
Uh,
yes, yes, yes. That's it.
Very old city, older than the country itself. So I wasn't raised in New Haven proper, but I was raised in New Haven County in a town named Milford outside of New Haven. So I really didn't go into the city much until I was like able
Into
to.
New Haven, the city?
Yeah, I really didn't
Okay.
go there much until I was able to like travel on my own and drive and whatnot, because I went to school there for a few years. Um, and yeah, that's a big part of why I started researching all this stuff because I'd always been interested in history and learning and understanding what's really going on in the world. And when I got to New Haven and really started walking around and exploring, I was confronted with so many different shocking realities, everything from, crime and poverty and drug addiction to like the complete opposite of that, like opulence and wealth and like
Hmm.
people coming from all around the world to get like a world class education. And
At
although I
Harvard.
didn't go to Yale,
I
the
did.
community college I went to was right next door to it. So I would, get out of class and just walk around and explore the city. And New Haven and Yale are pretty much like locked together. Like the whole downtown area is like half Yale campus, half New Haven. So,
Hmm.
you just kind of walk around and explore all these really old buildings. And I started to notice, weird architecture, and I started to learn about the secret societies and all that good stuff. So, yeah, Milford's where I was born and raised, kind of like a small city next to a bigger city. But it, has its suburban rural aspects too. Like there's a few farms in the town I grew up in. Not a lot of
Nice.
farmers, but yeah, it was a nice place to grow up. It's the Small city with a big heart. That's the motto.
Okay. So we're speedballing a little bit, but I'm gonna take it back a little bit. But before that, so Hartford, you said Hartford, right? No, New Haven, sorry. New Haven. So is this where Gilmore Girls was at? Or am I thinking of another place?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because sorry, I'm just looking for my backwoods. It's funny you mentioned that because a little inside information on me. I grew up in Milford, um,
Milford,
but
Milford
there's a
of New
town
Haven.
in Connecticut called New Milford, and it's not near
Mm.
Milford. It's not like a suburb of Milford or anything like that. It's like a different, altogether different part of the state, and that's where, like New Milford, Washington Depot, that town, those towns, that's where Gilmore Girls is based around. And what's funny is my uncle, he owns a grocery store in the center of town where Gilmore Girls was based. So,
Oh,
it's
okay.
got that small town vibe. There's only one grocery store. There's not like a big stop and shop or
Hmm.
anything like that in Washington Depot. So, yeah, odd that you brought that up. Why? Is that a favorite show of yours?
Just growing up, I just remember that, it was on like it was syndicated, I think on ABC or some shit. Like I used to see that shit all the time. It was like one of those, you know how you have like a whole bunch of shows you watch as a kid, like you have your cartoons and then you have your shows that you watch in between or in the daytime. That was one of the main like shows I used to watch as a child.
I hear
So
you. Yeah. Yeah, I remember catching it every now and then, but it wasn't like wasn't particularly something I watched. I just knew that my like where my cousins grew up, like the town was based on
Mhm.
it. But on some like conspiracy sort of research, me and my girlfriend were kind of looking into that recently, so that's why I
Oh
asked.
yeah?
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, okay. Well, can you give us a hint of some of the conspiracies related to Gilmore Girls?
Well, it is kind of like it's one of these quintessential kind of like American sitcom type shows where a lot of conversations were had in a way that, I don't know, people who identify as progressive probably really get behind.
Hmm.
So it was kind of one of these shows
Wow.
like The Office, or like another like good example, maybe like The Sopranos. Like, I don't know, there's all these shows that like hit like really hard for people. Like maybe not everybody, but like a certain demographic. And the idea behind it is that it's a part of this cultural shaping that goes on in think tanks like the Tavistock Institute, where they plan ahead of time. It's like, all right, we're going to create a show and have these themes in it. They'll let the producers, the Hollywood people, do the rest, fill in the blanks, but they want to see these themes. They want to see these ideas shared. So that was kind of where I approached it. I don't know necessarily, speaking for my girlfriend Tara, she probably had a different perspective on it. I'd have to ask her. I don't know off the top of my head, but I know that show meant something to her. So
Okay.
I personally didn't connect with it all that much. But
So there wasn't any like that wasn't like a thing in the town. Or you were probably a little bit much older by the time it was released, right?
yeah, well, no, I'm 29, so I
Oh,
would say
okay.
I was a little younger
Oh,
for that
we're
show.
the same age. I
Yeah.
turned 29 this year. Well, you're 1 year older than me. I turned 29 this year.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it just didn't hit my radar. I wasn't really, to be honest, I wasn't really that interested in a lot of those shows that weren't like comedy oriented. I was just more if it was on TV, it was either comedy or like science type stuff, or like ancient aliens or something like that. But
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. For whatever reason, it never really struck me. But as far as conspiracies goes, it it definitely, I think what's interesting about where the show takes place is that town has a lot of very wealthy people in it, and has always kind of had wealthy people in it. My uncle does pretty well, but he's not by any means, one of those like elites,
Hmm.
right? But I've heard of like, um, what's his name? George Soros. He had a house there. Henry Kissinger had a house not too far away. He recently passed away,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's just a few. There's a couple other really big name people that live in that area, and it makes sense because it's a secluded area, but it's also very close to New York City. You know, those guys, the elites, they want to be close to New York City for obvious reasons, but also have privacy and
Hmm.
lots of land because then you can, build your nice big mansion or whatever and not have to see your neighbors ever, and who knows what else, do some kind of
Yeah, do
crazy,
some wild
have,
shit, you know.
have some crazy parties or whatever. But yeah, no, when I was a kid, to take it back to like more your original kind of line of
Yeah,
questioning,
I was gonna get back to that, yeah.
my shows, like I liked a lot of the comedy stuff that was available on Comedy Central. um but I was particularly like interested in like Bruce Lee, and like I got into like kung fu movies, and that kind of got me into martial arts and cannabis and
Okay,
a
yeah.
whole bunch of other stuff when I was a teenager. But yeah, when I was growing up, I was like a big TV head. I would sit in front of the TV and watch a lot of stuff. But yeah, mostly like comedy or like history type stuff.
Okay, so as far aside from TV and like you spoke on it briefly, like you were mostly into like books and stuff. What were some of the activities that you were getting into in the New Haven area or just in your area? Like what were the hobbies of a young Mark?
Well, me and my friends, we would get into trouble. I had plenty of different groups of friends at different points in my life.
Hmm.
Um, before we started smoking weed, the trouble was mostly just getting into little fights and things like that, which is where I got interested in martial arts. And I'd always been interested in like soldiers and like superheroes and like that kind of stuff when I was younger. So, getting into fights and stuff, like, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily that I thought I was like a soldier or anything, but it definitely like appealed to this like sense of like adventurous, manly roughness that I saw in a lot of the stuff I was watching. But, honestly, I kind of realized pretty quickly with the fights and stuff that that wasn't the life I wanted to be involved in. I didn't want to get in trouble. And luckily, I didn't get in much trouble, but I did get into some fights. And yeah, that kind of taught me to learn how to fight rather than just getting into a bunch of fights. So I started getting into
Yes, so
martial arts and
sorry. So as far as the fights go, were they just like typical kid stuff like uh childhood angst, like you going around, you're trying to be the macho man, you're discovering yourself, like are
it
you
it
just getting
was
into
it
bullshit
was more
fights?
like it was more like, call you out at the lunch table, see you after school, and like UFC was on, and like it wasn't super popular, but like UFC was a thing back then when I
Hmm.
was in high school. So like there was an element of it where people wanted to see like a real fight. So like you
Yeah.
call somebody out, not that I always got called out, but
Okay,
I
that's what I
would
was
get
gonna
called
ask next. Where
out.
you're the aggressor.
Yeah, no, I would always get called out because I'm tall, so like I was tall back then too. So people have this like complex where they want to knock out the giant. So
Hmm.
I picked up on that when I was younger, but I would have to, stand up for myself. So I never like back down. I was always like, all right, I'll fight. So we would just they would just name a place and a time, and you'd have to be there. Otherwise, you were a chicken or worse. So
Yeah.
I didn't always win, but then when I started winning, people stopped calling me out. And then it was
Hmm.
like, oh, all right, this guy knows how to fight, respect. And then by the
Yeah.
time I was a senior, people were like afraid of me, like, yeah, because I was the captain of the wrestling team and like I did wrestling for 3 years. So, it toughened me up, but I've always had like a kind heart. So I've never been, you know, I won't say I've never been a bully because when I was really young, I was definitely a bully. But by the time I was in high school, I was not like that anymore. But when you're young and you have younger cousins and younger siblings, like you screw you toughen them up. You get my cousins, they did not take any, slack on me. They took it all out on me, my older cousins. So I had my moment to like dish it back out. And
Hmm.
but when I was a kid, we just hung out in the neighborhood. Like it was, I don't know. I don't know that I see many kids doing that today. Occasionally I'll see younger kids like on their bikes and stuff, but we would go out and hang out from like ages like 8 to like 15. I was always outside hanging out with my friends. And if I wasn't outside, I would be like in my room reading, getting into stuff. I had, computers, so I would read stuff on the computer. So yeah, I don't know. As far as like activities go though, I was never really into sports aside from wrestling. I did martial arts, but yeah, not really into that kind of thing. But yeah, yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Like
So to take it back a little bit, can you take me back to a moment where, like, or like one of the earliest moments where you remember, like, okay, or like a situation where someone's picking on you, they call you out to fight. Can you take me back to those moments? Like, what did you feel? And the second part to it is, when you got home, did you confide in your parents, or like, did you speak to anybody?
oh yeah, I'm for sure. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't even remember like the first time that probably happened, but no, by the time like second or third time, it was kind of like, I don't want to get in trouble, so I better not tell my parents this. But
Mhm.
yeah, like the first time, definitely. Because I had a neighbor that was like just a couple years older than me and real mean. And he would do stuff like put rocks and snowballs for snowball fights and like just crappy, just not
He was just a
cool.
dick. Yeah.
Yeah, just bully stuff on a whole nother level. So yeah, I had a few run-ins with him that kind of that toughened me up and made me realize like, all right, some people you avoid, some people you don't need to, win every battle with. Sometimes just
So
knowing.
it kind of started at home, but not home, but it's
Yeah, like real
in the
close to home.
neighborhood.
And my dad even had beef with like his dad too at a certain point. So
Mm.
it was almost like a family feud kind of thing, like with the
So
fence.
did you inherit the beef? Like, do you think
Oh,
the beef came
I
because
think I
of
started the beef in a way.
where?
Yeah, because we were all cool when we were younger, and then as we got older, there was like a split, and then and then the dad started beefing. So, yeah, I
Oh
think my
shit.
dad just had my back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
That's what's
also,
up.
like father, like son. So the kid was a dick for a reason, right? So you know what I mean. No disrespect. Like I'm sure they're
Damn,
good
so it
people
happened.
to a
It
certain
happened.
extent, but
Yeah, so it happened after you guys were older. So like, looking back at it, like, was this a long time neighbor? Like, did you guys like legit grow up together?
no, like it's weird. Like as soon as they moved in, I was probably like right at the end of elementary school, and he was probably like in middle school or so a little bit older than me.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, he was kind of just like big brother kind of thing. Like we would hang out and like shoot airsoft guns and stuff. That
Oh
was one of the
shit.
things that I used to do a lot, shoot airsoft guns with my friends. But
So he
yeah,
was just part of the group.
not even. It was just like a me and him would hang out if he was around kind of thing. And then at a certain point, you just age apart and like yeah, he just it wasn't cool. I remember one time I went over his place and we were playing like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and I was way too young to be playing that game, but it definitely imprinted on me because then I started like listening to rap and like playing that game when I could get my hands on it. So yeah, he
Nice.
he wasn't all bad, but definitely not somebody that I would ever talk to ever again.
Damn, so what the fuck happened? You guys started off as friends. Like, what was
Well,
it?
when you're young, man, shit happens. When you're young, you have more in common. But yeah, no, I think it's just a thing where like he grew up in like a tougher neighborhood and then kind of moved to like a more mild neighborhood and then like was the toughest kid in the neighborhood kind of thing. You know what I
Okay.
mean? So he was
Okay,
just
okay.
used to like a different crowd of like kids where he initially grew up and he moved to my neighborhood. and just cause chaos for a
So,
little while.
and I forgot to ask you this. Are you like how many siblings do you have, or are you an only child?
I have a younger sister, but yeah, I mean, we're pretty close. We're close in age. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay, so she
but
was around.
we didn't hang out all that much. So it did kind of feel sometimes like you know, like, oh, I wish I had a brother or something like that. But I love my sister, definitely. But it
Yeah.
almost feels like being an only child when you only have one sibling who's the opposite gender, because we were close in age. She wasn't,
Yeah, that's the
I had to
surprise to
step
me.
up and be like the big brother a lot. And I probably wasn't always the best big brother when I was younger, but yeah, I think now she looks up to me and we have each other's back. So
Do
that's
you
cool.
do you feel like you were actively when you were younger, were you actively like running away from that responsibility? Like, damn, I gotta be the big brother. Like, I just want
I
to go
never
do my
even
own
thought
thing.
about it like that. I always just had like this like mischievous oh, like she's my sister, like gotta
Ju-
pull her hair, or
You
gotta
just gotta
tease her.
prank her and do
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think it's a East Coast thing. A lot of people where I grew up, we have like a tough love policy, or like a, bust each other's balls kind of attitude. I think that a lot of people are like that. I don't even know if it's just East Coast, but yeah,
That's
no,
definitely an American thing. Yeah, definitely. American
maybe.
East Coast type of thing. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Word.
So no, but yeah, me and my sister get along nowadays for sure.
Okay, that's what's up. That's what's up. So, okay. So you're growing up in this town, you and your friends just basically, but you had different friend groups. So you had, what was your OG friend group? Because you had,
Well, growing up in the neighborhood, you make friends with kids in the neighborhood. And yeah,
my bad, sorry.
no, it's all good. You
You
still
couldn't
there?
hear nothing, right?
No, 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 I couldn't hear anything.
Okay, that's why I had paused on my bad. So I was trying to ask you, I was trying to ask you, so what were your different friend groups? Because so I know you said you had multiple friend groups, and you had you had the neighbor, so that's like kind of like the guy you hang around here and there, and then what? Then you had like your friends from school, and then like the neighborhood pals.
Yeah, well, there were kids that I met like just from being a kid and exploring the neighborhood, and like,
Hmm.
my grandmother's house wasn't too far away, so I knew the kids in her neighborhood. So like, yeah, the kids I went to school with that lived in my neighborhood that I was friends with. But here's the thing, like once didn't play sports, like a lot of the kids I knew from school, that kind of phased me out of that friend group. So like I never quite was a jock, although I didn't really see it that way back then. But I got yeah, I don't know, I just got involved
Damn,
with
but you
kids.
wouldn't consider yourself a jock if you were the captain of the wrestling team?
Yeah, no, I don't. That's funny, right?
What? That,
No, and
yeah, no.
I even felt like I didn't fit in with those guys, although they're all awesome. But I was more like the class clown of the wrestling team than the actual like captain. Because I,
Hmm.
I had I had three co-captains, so like it was all four of us. It wasn't just me. I wasn't like the shining star of the team by any
Okay.
means. But I was hardworking, and I think that's why my coaches let me be the captain. And the reason why my teammates voted me the captain is because everybody liked me and I kept the morale high. Like I was always like, I don't know. At least I remember it that way. Somebody on my team might hear this and be like, "What the fuck are you talking about,
Yeah.
Steve?" But yeah, no, yeah, that was one friend group. And then yeah, when you're growing up, like things change. Like you don't always stick with the same groups of friends, and then where my town's at, we have like the different elementary schools, we have the three different middle schools, and then two different high schools. So like
Yeah.
I knew some kids from my elementary school, but then when you get to middle school, you meet kids from all these other elementary schools, and then you get to high school, you meet all these kids from all these other middle schools, right? So as the different waves of meeting new people happened, I'd make new friends. So that's really what I mean by like, making different groups of friends. But yeah, no, I was always kind of like on the weirder side of the demographic. Like I got voted like most changed since sixth grade, and I was also
That's a random one.
voted like tallest. But my friend Darren, he went on to play basketball in Europe. He was
Oh,
always
nice.
taller than me. So then once him and I were in the same group or grade or whatever, then he was always the
He
taller
took
one.
on the mantle. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but I was a little outshined in that department. But yeah, no, there was definitely like a big switch then when I went to high school, because then I kind of, you become like a little fish in a big pond. There's more people, new people, and all that. So I became kind of quiet and more of who I am today at that point in time. And then when I started wrestling, that kind of helped me become more social, more outgoing. And then eventually martial arts kind of led me to smoking weed, because when I was real young, I was against all drugs. Like I saw like people drinking growing up, I saw like certain friend groups like get into like smoking like weird shit, like not even weed, like they would just start smoking cigarettes for no reason, and they were in middle school, like it just made
Yeah.
no sense. So I was always against that when I was young, but then when I got into high school, like halfway through, I saw like some TV show, and they were talking about Bruce Lee and how there's evidence that he used cannabis to train, and like he oh, he said that cannabis was like the number one way to relieve whatever after working out. So it got in my head like, oh, maybe this isn't such a bad thing. And then I
Hmm.
saw like another thing that was like kind of funny, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun. And then a friend was just like, yo, we're smoking weed, come over. So, uh, and I just did, and yada yada. Next thing I know, my mind opens up, and I start getting into all the stuff that I talk about on the podcast. So that was kind of like a pivotal moment for me, because
Around what age was that?
that was like 17, 16 and a half, right around those years. But I was like really dead set on martial arts and like UFC. Like I almost thought I was going to be like an MMA fighter
Mm.
professionally back then. And then I also thought I would like join the army or something too. But then when I smoked weed, I
It
still
changed
really
your
liked
life.
martial arts, but I was like, screw the army, man. I can't do that. And then all the conspiracy stuff that I had kind of picked up on here and there all started to make a lot more sense, because I'd been into it. I had known about like loose change and all this stuff with 9/11. I mean, I saw 9/11 happen in my elementary school. Like they took us into the library and showed it to us on TV that day. So, I remembered that
It's kind of
pretty,
weird, right?
yeah, very weird.
Everybody has the same story.
Yeah, everybody does. That's come up on my show too a bunch. And yeah, I was just looking at some 9/11 footage on TikTok
I
looking for
had a guy, weirdly enough, I had a guy on the podcast that his school was the school George Bush was in, but it wasn't his teacher. Well, that was his teacher, but it wasn't his class. That was the
also
English teacher.
he wasn't
He
in the
wasn't in
class,
that
but it
class
was
at
the
the
same
moment.
school. Damn.
Yeah, because he said that that class was as soon as you walked in, it was like the library. So it was like the first door as soon as you walked into the left. But he was in his regular homeroom, and then like that teacher, like they held
Dude,
that
that
special
whole
thing.
that whole time period was weird to be a kid, dude, because I remember that happened, and there were other things that like would happen in school that I would be like low key thinking like this is like weird that they're saying this to us. Like it almost felt like the news, because I'd watched the news with my grandparents a lot. Like when I was a kid, I would go over to my grandparents' house. They would babysit me and whatnot. So I would watch the news with them and just kind of, I don't know. I feel like I grew up kind of fast in that sense.
Mhm.
And that's partly why I even wanted to join the military, because, after 9/11, it was like every day they would show like tanks and like helicopters shooting like hellfire missiles, and like, it was just like Gulf War, not the Gulf War, but like that first like wave of troops going into, what was it, Iraq for the first,
Yeah,
and then after that, sometime later, Afghanistan. So that kind of got me like also a little bit radicalized, like, oh, the war is bad, like we need to stop this. And I remember my grandparents would say like, oh, well, you're just young, like all teenagers say this, you're just a bleeding heart liberal, like you're like all the other teenagers. and
yeah.
and that kind of stuck with me. but but yeah, as far as like growing up and whatnot, I think smoking weed kind of let a lot of that fall to the wayside, and I was able to really connect with what was really important to me, which was kind of figuring out who I am, why I'm here, and what to do. And I kind of feel like it took me a while, but now that I'm podcasting and writing and learning about this stuff, I do kind of feel like I'm at that point, not quite there,
Nice.
with
That's good
everything
though,
in
man.
life, but definitely more so than when I was, talking to the guidance counselor in high school, like, well, what do you want to be?
Yeah. Wow, that's really good though, bro. Hell yeah. So take me back to that day when the first time you hit that blunt for the first time. Like take me back to the whole scenario.
Oh man, well, the first blunt I ever smoked was with 4 or 5 different friends.
Mhm.
I'll say their first names just to give some like
You don't gotta
visual.
give no names.
No, all right, no names, no names.
Man, you
But
don't gotta give no names.
it was
Well,
fun.
shout them out. Fuck it. If you want, shout them out, bro.
Well, I think one of my homies would like to shout out. So shout out to my buddy John, who's always been down and always with me and still my friend to this day. I
Shout out
don't
to
think he
John.
really smokes weed like that anymore, but he definitely is a real one and always going to be my number one friend. But as far as weed smoking goes, because I do have other best friends
Yeah.
who, because John was like my sensei, like he got me into it in that sense.
How
Uh,
did he convince you?
well, it was weird because the first time we all smoked, we like passed the blunt around, and we were at like somebody's like house, and like the parents weren't home for like the whole week, so we were just smoking in the living room. And I feel like that was just so weird of an experience, being in someone's living room and doing that in
Feels like that.
itself, that
It's
I
like it's like a guilty moment, right? Sorry to cut you off, but it's like, oh shit, somebody what if their parents come home and then they're gonna
yeah,
tell my parents?
it was anxiety kind of in a way. So, but yeah, so that was weird. I didn't get high. And a lot of people say that, you don't get high the first time. But then the second time I smoked weed, I gave it another shot in the back of my friend John's Chevy Lumina, and we ripped the bong. And dude, I was on a whole nother level. I was making jokes. I had the whole car going nuts laughing at me because of the stuff I was just like, because it was like, I was always kind of reserved and I would make people laugh, but I was always very like calculated about what I would say. Whereas I smoked the bong and all of a sudden I'm speaking off the cuff, letting it fly,
It just
saying
lets you unwind.
whatever. Yeah, so that was cool. And then, I just really, when it all clicked for me was when I smoked by myself and like got my hands on my own weed and just smoked by myself in my own like space and time, and just got a chance to just be in my mind. And that, believe it or not, was in, because my backyard was weird. Like I grew up in a suburb where most of the houses have pretty much the same size yard, like a small yard, not small in comparison to what I've seen in like cities, but like, you know, about the same size as the house, right? So
Mhm.
like you have about the same space that your house is sitting on behind the house, right? Whereas my backyard growing up was in between two like streets. So it was just a straight cut of forest behind my house. And there's other people's backyards kind of on the border of both sides of the forest. So when I was a kid, I was just in the forest all the time, getting into all kinds of stuff, exploring, so I would go back there. Me and my dad, when I was really young, built like this. really, really crappy tree house. Like it was not even in a tree. It just had like a tree next to it. Like it was a poor
But
excuse
it was
for a
ground
tree
level.
house. But it was off the ground. And me and my buddies would like shoot each other with airsoft guns out of it. So it was fun. But then when I started smoking, then it became like my secret weed hut. So yeah, then I
Nice.
would just smoke back there in the and I'm not talking about like what you see on history or on like, the travel channel where these guys build like super cool tree houses with like
Yeah,
window.
because you
I'm
said your
talking
backyard isn't that big though. So I'm trying
it's
to
it's pretty big. It's like a forest, but
okay.
it's like narrow. It's long and narrow, right? So like if you're in the middle of forest, you could look to both sides and kind of see people's houses, but for the most part, you're kind of like in this own little space. Especially for
Okay.
a kid, it felt huge. But now I'm like, oh God, how did I ever, I was basically right on top of these people. But it,
Yeah.
but
Like
there's a
now
lot
you
of
look at it and it's just like six trees.
no, no, it's better.
Okay.
It's better than six trees. I'll say
Okay,
that.
okay.
It's
Okay, okay.
deep, but I think people from this city would be like, "Whoa, you got all this in your backyard." But someone from like upstate New York would look at it and be like, "What's that? Like that ain't
Yeah.
nothing." So, yeah,
It
perspective
was
is
decent. It was
important.
decent, yeah.
Perspective.
No,
But
but as a kid is yeah.
I'm talking about like 8 pieces of plywood, like
Okay.
I'm not talking about a crazy tree house. Don't get it,
Okay,
too.
because since you when you said it's like a tree house but not a tree house, I'm picturing like you know how like they have those little hunter huts? I'm
Yeah.
picturing like a smaller version of that. Like
No, it was bigger than that. It was definitely
okay.
bigger than that, but it was just like crappy
So how many people
material
could fit in there?
comfortably, like 6 kids. Like we would get like
Just siphon.
yeah, we could fit like 4 or 5 like picnic chair type chairs in there,
Mm,
and like a crappy little table. But
okay.
the floor wasn't that strong after it was, up there for a few years because you get the snow and the rain and all that. So I remember one day my buddy, a different John, another John, fell through the floor and we were like,
What
all
the
right,
fuck?
that's the last time we're going going up in the treehouse. So yeah, they
Mid
don't
blunt?
like I said. No, no, this was actually before the treehouse had already been condemned by the time I was smoking in it. I didn't let
Was there
anybody.
still a hole in there?
Yeah, yeah. I just threw a piece of plywood over the hole, and then I had a new floor on top of the other floor. So I knew my way around it, but I wouldn't let like other people up there because then it'd be too much weight.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
but then eventually we took that down. And then when it was really cold out, we would like put the pieces of plywood up and make a little like smoking in
Yeah.
my parents' house. And we didn't have cars either. So we didn't have like a ride to smoke in yet. So, a couple of my friends had cars, but not me and the guys that I grew up with, like in my neighborhood. Shout out to my boy Alex, just talking to him the other day, and he's younger than me, so I put him on to smoking weed in a sense. Like,
You were his OG?
yeah, and like my other friend Matt, he was the same age as me. He also wasn't really like into it, and then he got into it. So the three of us would hang out, and we would build like we would put that fort together in the cold, get in the back in the woods, and we would just smoke in that little shed, man, and listen to like Army of the Pharaohs, listen to like Vinny Paz, listen to Immortal Technique. I mean, we're definitely into like Wu-Tang Clan, but like on the more obscure level of things, like
Hmm.
really underground rap, like nonfiction. I could go on. It just got to give me a second. But yeah, that was
Your
our
shit was just very niche subgenre type of shit.
yeah. We like the underground rap. I mean, we were into normal rap, like not normal, but more mainstream rap as well, but not so much. Like we kind of got into more of the stoner underground vibe rap. And I had some friends that were
Like the
into
Mac
like
Millers and shit early on type of thing.
yeah, well, Kid Cudi, Mac Miller, that kind of stuff was popular when I was a kid. But even though like we didn't even like that kind of stuff. We were more into like the hardcore rap stuff, like talking about like crazy stuff and not even like gangster stuff. It was more I don't know. It's hard to describe because there was a gangster element to a lot of that underground rap, but it was like intelligent. It wasn't just like shooting each other and like
So who are
fighting
some of your
over
favorite
hot
rappers
shit.
back in those days?
Well, the Army of the Pharaohs is a group, and there's like 12 different guys associated with that. So all 12 of them, they each have their own
I've
like
never
solo
heard of them.
careers. Yeah, Vinny Paz, he still comes out with new stuff. He's still like putting out new music. Apathy, he's from Connecticut. He was connected with those
I've heard
guys.
Apathy. I've heard of Apathy.
Yeah, Apathy's interesting. He's a Freemason though, so I
Oh,
I don't always listen to all of his stuff the same way I do other rappers, but yeah, Aesop Rock, he's a little more like lyrical and kind of alternative. Um, the Rhyme Sayers crew from Minnesota, there's like Atmosphere and ID and Abilities and a couple other guys that were in that area. And then yeah, like the stuff we were into was more East Coast rap, but like
okay.
the underground stuff. Immortal
Okay, so
Technique, he's
okay,
another popular one. Ari the Rugged Man. I mean, I could keep going.
okay. I didn't know like 95% of those names you mentioned.
Well, and
Probably,
to be
yeah.
fair, like I started with like Big L and like
No,
Nas, like
yeah.
Jay-Z, like so like I didn't immediately go straight to that stuff, but I kind of when I was younger, I would like listen to that kind of stuff. And as I got older, I started to think about the subliminal messaging in a lot of that music. And that's why I went to the underground stuff because the lyrics were a little more transparent. Like they were
Mhm.
really telling you what they were really thinking. They weren't like putting it in coded messages and stuff like that. It's hard to explain. I think people get it now more
No,
that
yeah,
there's
I get it. Yeah,
Illuminati TikTok stuff that shows how like a lot of these rappers are sus, but
that
back
shit
then,
is just like nowadays. It's kind of like, bro, we understand it's fake. Like it's
yeah.
like whatever like the Project Bluebeam of saying is a hip hop is like whatever that project is. We need to figure out the name of it because it's like, bro, it's
Well, I
like
think it
so.
went along the same lines of like COINTELPRO. There's an argument that hip hop was like a very pro black sort of
A movement. Yeah,
a
I,
movement to uplift people impoverished, especially poor black, men in the urban places in America. And then the FBI or whoever came and co-opted that and made it about gang banging and drug selling so that you could keep this prison industry. I mean, I'm not the guy to talk to about that. Obviously, there's tons of people that have brought that up, but I started to
no,
kind of pick up on that, when I was younger, and that's what made me listen to like the conspiracy rap, as I call it, because those guys were actually talking about like conspiracy theories and like Rick Ross, Freeway Rick Ross, and how what like he was selling crack and like connected to the FBI. So like they were
yeah,
speaking the truth even on their own industry.
yeah, definitely. It's definitely like because I've heard like you guys mentioned it on the shows like the Ice Cube is the Larry the Cable Guy of well not you Sam usually says that
Oh,
he's like
Sam
Ice Cube,
says that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Ice Cube is the Larry Cable Guy of hip hop, but it's just like I understand that because that like that whole idea that we are talking about, they're addressing it nowadays. Like people say like yeah they're definitely pushing those type of songs like the drills nowadays, like the drill music or like the violence or like the trap music. And they'll tell you like, hey, just make it more like this. And but it's like you could decide to not do it, but then like it's like they're probably gonna drop you. So it's like it's definitely a hidden hand behind it, but I wouldn't put it on the artists themselves.
I don't know. They're participating in something that I'm with you. It's out of their hands. They have the incentive. I mean, it's exploitation, right? Because these people who do well in this music industry, they can talk about things that they actually lived, right? Which is this glorified lifestyle of crime. And it's incentivized for them to talk about it because people have been conditioned to like sex and violence, right? It triggers our subconscious, hormonal body, right? It triggers adrenaline in us when we see that and we hear the music behind it. So yeah, no, I don't think it's the artist. If anything, maybe they don't realize what they're participating in, or they probably think to themselves like, well, it's worth it because I'm gonna, make the money I need to take care of my family and get out of it, and you do see a lot of like, I'll say I'm not by any means opposed to recognizing this. There's plenty of rappers who have turned around and helped tons of people out, especially
Yeah.
from their own community. And those are tend to be the rappers that I like, and I like their music because you could hear their authenticity. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm not the guy to talk to about all that. Anyone can see there's problems in pop culture in general. It's not just the rap industry,
No, yeah,
but
definitely.
but when I was younger, that was a big influence on me for sure. Rap music and um I like rock, classic rock. My parents were into that, so I would listen to that and stuff, but just rap appealed to me more. And then I found the underground stuff and it was like, oh wow, okay, this is like teaching me something, and I recommend it. Even though you don't recognize the names, like it's worth going back and listening to a couple of their songs. Probably the most well-known song from that genre is called End of Days by Vinny Paz. And like bar after bar, like line after line is just facts, like stuff you would hear people talking about today on
Hmm.
podcasts. But this song came out in like I think the 90s, so or early
Okay, nice, nice.
2000s. So
I
like
need to do
yeah,
my homework on that.
way ahead of their time, as far as like the culture of conspiracy, the rap music was where these conversations were taking place before podcasts were really popular. And the books obviously always had this information, but back then, like, you could go on like Google videos and find like weird long, like 6-hour videos of like someone like, Jordan Maxwell or whoever talking about the banking system or talking about how the federal government's lying to us or, what have you. So I think a lot of that rap was informed by that, like the
Yeah.
early, early internet, and then also like conspiracies from the street, because people in, urban communities and impoverished communities, they always make conspiracy theories. I think it's just natural to for the elite to turn it into that thing where it's like, oh yeah, no, those are just conspiracy theories. It's like
I mean,
no,
yeah, even the inception of conspiracy theory is was created by who? Was it the CIA or the FBI? I forget which
well,
one.
yeah, it was the CIA that popularized the term. I don't quite know who first coined it, but definitely popularized by the
Hmm.
CIA after the JFK assassination.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's why I always go into like everything's a psyop. Me, I'll be thinking like it's so like what's the word? Is it pessimistic? But it's just like sometimes I even think like, what if everything is just a lie? Like whatever is out here is like the complete opposite. That's like the occult is truly like the occult. Like even what we think is like, oh, this is the occult, but is it really the occult? If you could just find a book and read about it, like think about it, like
Well,
like,
you have a point there. I think there's certain things that get labeled occult because they're really taboo,
mhm.
and I think now in the modern time that we're in, taboo has kind of become a thing of the past. Like how many things are really taboo?
Not much.
It's almost like the only things that are taboo are the things that are illegal now, which is sad because, and yeah, I will say like, oh well, 200 years ago people would get, hung for being a witch or something. And like, yeah, like obviously I'm not advocating to go back to a time where people could,
Yeah.
just get accused of something and then immediately killed. Like, obviously not, but there's this weird sort of I don't know. It feels like people have this sense that, like, oh yeah, all this stuff is so forbidden when really it's been super popular for the past 200 years, like
Yeah,
occult and magic. And uh I think as long as humans have existed, we've been interested in this kind of stuff. It's like, I think it's just a matter of the powers that be controlling us and giving us this sense that if you play around with it, bad things will happen. And I'm not saying that's necessarily false. Like, it is true that if you mess around with magic or what, maybe worse, like dark ritual, all kinds of weird stuff like that. I, yeah, probably it's not good for everyone to know that kind of information.
yeah,
But yeah, I don't know. It definitely seems like the powers that be flaunt that kind of those symbols. So, what that means, maybe it means that they're using it for powerful reasons to gain power rather, and keeping us afraid of it is their way of controlling it. It's like an advantage possibly.
right, right, right. I don't know, man. Sometimes I get into like with the whole conspiracy shit. It's like once you open the door, it's like sometimes you start just looking at everything like, well, hold on, what about this and that and this and that, and then like, what if everything is just a lie? And like, well, what if, not to be sacrilegious, like, what if Satan is the church is really Satan's church, and we don't even know it, and we just pray into that too, also.
I recently talked to someone on my podcast who basically says just that. And, I'm not someone who has anything against any religion. I'm just curious about the truth. I was
Yeah, I
raised
mean,
Catholic, but I particularly don't identify that way. I believe in a creator, but I don't
mhm.
necessarily think that there has to be a Bible for the creator to exist. Like, just because the Bible says that there's a creator doesn't mean that that's the only reason to believe there's a creator.
Yeah, and
There is.
this, do you know what's the thing too? Is like with the Bible, even it's like not even the Bible, like religion, like every church is gonna have its own agenda that it's pushing. You get it? And they're gonna interpret because like for me, like the beginnings of my early conspiracy mind, or just like not anti, but just like questioning stuff was like, okay, we're at church today. Why are they telling us to read this chapter and then we're gonna skip to 9 chapters later? We're gonna read another verse that's gonna somewhat relate to this, but like, what else is happening in the middle of all of that? Like, why are we just picking what we want and putting that out? Like, then there's more to this. You get it? And then you start looking at like the Bible tells you not to like they always say like to the synagogue of Satan or such shit like that. But I feel like the bigger message was don't go to church at all. Like don't go to a church or something like that. You get it?
Well, let me ask you this. Do you know what the Septuagint is?
The Septuagint, I've heard the name. I don't know everything about it.
So the Old Testament is based on the Septuagint, which was
Mm,
written in ancient Greek. And this guy who I spoke to on my podcast said his name is Dr. Aman Hillman. He said that the Old Testament was basically translated by 72 people,
hmm
and we're just supposed to take it on their word that they got it accurately, right? So, and he himself said, like, I've learned how to read ancient Greek and this is not what it says. I'll stop there. People can go and like learn more from him if they're curious. But I'm with you when you start to think like everything's that we've been taught could be a lie. And
The
you
inversion.
think about like the school systems, they were started by religious figures. Like the whole idea of the university comes from the church. So,
Yeah.
it's not like these worlds are so separate. It's only in the past 100 or so years that we've begun to think of spirituality and science as separate things. But that wasn't the case.
It's not
Yeah,
the case nowadays
yeah,
because
exactly.
we like I don't know the exact fact, but I know that the church has more like invested than anybody else in looking into the cosmos and everything
Oh
else,
yeah.
like
And that
telescopes,
should tell
everything.
you that they're paying attention to something out there. And I
Hmm.
think it's because they have ancient information about these whatever's outside of the Earth's atmosphere. Some people have trouble believing that humans could go outside of that. I personally don't. I think it's all interesting and I'm willing to look into it all. But yeah, it does seem like they have vested interest in observing, something out there. I was just talking to a guy today on my podcast who's written a book about the Anunnaki and talks about how, there's different planets that once existed in our solar system that are no longer here. One of them exploded and created the asteroid belt and the moon,
Mm.
so, like the moon, they've found craters on the moon that are older than the moon itself. How could that be, right? If the moon isn't, from an older, larger body of, mass, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
because there's certain tribes that have stories before the moon of the times before the moon and stuff like that.
yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that.
Yeah.
And I asked him about that, and he had an interesting response. He said that as far as he knows, the Earth, the moon, and the asteroid belt were all created at the same point. So like the Earth and the moon are a part of the same piece, but that's not to say that those people are wrong. Maybe they maybe they survived, some sort of ancient cataclysm and were put on this earth after that whatever it was they came
I mean,
from
if
exploded.
I'm not mistaken, I think that was one of those South African tribes, and I think they also have a s- a legend that they came from the planet Sirius. So
Right. That's exactly what we were talking about,
yeah.
man. It's crazy because so many megaliths are aligned to these stars, right? But
Hmm.
check this. Where you're in New York City, right? So
Yeah.
on Manhattan, on the island of Manhattan, there are six I forget how many, but there's a certain number of obelisks. One of them is called Cleopatra's Needle, and they
The one
actually,
in Central Park.
yeah, they took it from Egypt and
Yeah, they
brought.
are.
Yeah, you've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Well, apparently those are placed. All the obelisks in New York and it's on Manhattan are placed to reflect Orion. So and Sirius. So it's kind of weird like when you see this stuff happening in the ancient world and you see modern cities picking up on the same practice of like mirroring architecture with this constellations. I think
I
it
didn't.
implies that we come from above,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. You know, I didn't. I didn't do the research. Was it your podcast? I believe you had somebody on that mentioned there's a Manhattan Henge. Do you know where that's at? Or do
Huh.
you know anything about that? I heard there's a Manhattan Henge. I'll have to do my research on it.
I don't know, man. That's a really interesting question. So would that be like a Stonehenge in Manhattan? Is that what you're saying? Because
Type
I
of
don't
thing.
remember that. It
Yeah.
might not be
Be-
my
It
podcast.
was it might have been on tinfoil. It was basically because the conversation was about how the I forgot what it's called, the landlines, how things are on the different landlines, and I believe it was like Stonehenge, and then they mentioned there was a Manhattan Henge. I just didn't do my research to look it up, but I'll look into it.
Huh.
I just wanted
Manhattan
to add.
Henge, also called the Manhattan Solstice, is an event during which the setting sun or rising sun is aligned with the east-west streets of the Main Street grid of Manhattan.
On 30 or like 31st Street. I've seen that.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess that's interesting. So yeah, the city's buildings are aligned. Um, it's in accordance with Commissioner's Plan of 1811. The street grid for most of Manhattan is rotated 29 degrees clockwise from true east-west. Thus, when the azimuth for sunset is 299 degrees or 29 degrees north of due west, the sunset aligns with the street on that grid. The rectilinear grid design runs from north of Houston Street in Lower Manhattan to south of 155th Street in Upper Manhattan. And then, yeah, so, and you can even see it if you're in New Jersey. You can see like the sun reflecting through the skyscrapers, and it has this interesting effect. But I mean,
Ah,
look at that right there. The planners of Manhattan, not only did they
mhm.
have knowledge of Stonehenge, but they took that into consideration. Dude, I'm so glad you showed me this. I don't know what guest talked about this. Maybe it was tinfoil hat. I can't listen to every episode. I just don't have enough time in the week, but I try to listen. I try to get around to listening to everyone. So if it was a recent
It
episode,
was
maybe,
a recent. It was a
yeah.
recent. I think it dropped
Oh,
last week.
cool. Yeah, I'll have to
No,
go and make sure I check them all out. But cool, man. Yeah, I didn't know about this. I'm glad you brought this to my attention.
okay, so it's the buildings. That's funny. Okay. I'll have to do some more research on that too. Wow. So okay. So what let's take it back a little bit because we got a little deep into conspiracy, but we'll come back to conspiracy. So all right, so you're in high school, you're the captain of the wrestling team. You thought you were gonna be in some type of mixed martial arts background, or you wanted to go to the military. And so take me to graduation because I heard recently in one of your podcasts you said you went to college, but you didn't stay for too long.
Yeah, so martial arts was a big thing for me. Wrestling was a big thing for me at that time. I started smoking weed, and that didn't like slow me down. I kept doing martial arts, even after I was out of school. And
Quick question, was your recovery better or
oh yeah, I would get high every day. I still do. And I think it made me uh it made me more focused. I won't say it made me like a better athlete. I think my hard work made me a better athlete, but it made me more focused and able to like stay in the zone longer than I might have
okay,
before. That was always my trouble with sports, like wasn't interested and couldn't pay attention long enough
so you'll
to,
zone out.
yeah, it just wasn't my thing. I tried playing baseball and all that, but yeah, no, I liked martial arts. And with college, I wanted to learn something about like kind of that reflected what I was starting to get interested in, which was like psychedelics, religion, history, ancient history, the culture, conspiracy, like, and anthropology seemed to reflect all that. So, for people who don't know, anthropology is the study of human culture. Um, and it was, I took like a class on it, and it was interesting, but it really didn't like seem like the work I would put in to get a degree in that would lead to anything that I wanted to do. It seemed like the only jobs available for those types of degrees was like somebody working with like, I don't know, archaeologist somewhere, like digging up, bones and stuff. I don't know. It just occurred to me that like, this isn't quite what I should be doing. So I just started kind of, reading a lot more because I'm like, well, I could still learn, but I'll just get paid while I'm learning instead of pay to learn. So I had a job at the time as a delivery guy, and in between food deliveries, I would read in the restaurant, and that was kind of cool. And then somewhere eventually, I ran into my buddy who was like the only conspiracy theorist I knew. Like he was one of the only people that independently was interested in this kind of stuff, and would like actively talk about it with me. So he walks in the restaurant one day and he's like, "Oh, dude, you should come through and uh, meet up with me at this frat house that I'm a part of." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know you're in college." I'm like, "I just dropped out." I'm like, I don't really, want to go back." And he's like, "No, I'm not in college." He's like, "It's not really about that." He's like it's just a cool place to hang out. He's like, just come try it. It's fun." So I'm like, "All right, cool. I'll give it a shot." And my buddy John, who I mentioned before, not the one who fell through the treehouse, the other one,
Smoker
he
John.
yeah, he was also a part of it, and I had like helped him move in. So I'd been to this frat house before. I
Okay.
just didn't really like.
What sorority was, I mean, what fraternity was it?
Well, was part of Southern Connecticut State University at a certain point, but then they got like banned from campus, but they kept going like as their own independent organization, which is why they allowed people from other schools and non-students. So they just kind of did their own thing, and is called Omega Psi, but even that's probably saying too much. But yeah, so I basically, long story short, went and became part of this kind of like party frat, which gave me a bunch of new friends, and also it was in New Haven, so it gave me like an excuse to stay in New Haven more or be in New Haven more, and that was
Uh-oh.
that was fun and exciting, and yeah, it was just like interesting, kind of the
Are you still a part of
synchronicities.
this fraternity, brother?
No, no. Yeah, I would have to become like an official like alumni, and there was a whole process for that, which I liked it. I'll never talk badly about that place. It was great. They never did anything weird or, anything that I didn't consent to me. So that was good because I've heard worse stories
Did you
about
get initiated? Or
Oh
like
yeah, I was a part of it. I was a brother, but yeah, I didn't stick around long enough to be like an alumni and still be a part of it. But what was cool is the guys that initially started the frat and then got like banned off of campus. They had this whole like history that was really interesting, and some of it involved Skull and Bones and how they had, because you're a frat in a town with a very infamous frat. So what
to
did
get
they
under them?
No, they never they never were ever like friendly with them at all. In fact, the opposite. They went and they made it their goal to steal something from Skull and Bones, because Skull and Bones has this reputation as a fraternity of Yale for
That
stealing.
steals.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do like, all sorts of.
Geronimo skull and shit.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. Like now they say that they only steal things like street signs or things that could be easily replaced. But yeah, they have a history of actually stealing really, and it's not even really something to joke about, the whole Geronimo thing. It's a desecration of a person's
Native
grave.
American, yeah. Hmm.
So, but that's a whole different story. So the Skull and Bones fraternity had the tomb, but they also have their like house that the members can sleep in if they don't have their own room, right? So some of them live there. And the group I was connected to essentially before my time, like a decade before my time, had gone to the Skull and Bones house, and not the tomb, and taken a flag off their front porch. And that flag was displayed, prominently somewhere
What type of flag was it?
in
Was
our
it their
possession.
insignia?
Yeah, it was a Jolly Roger flag, which is a little different because it's more of a pirate flag. It's not like it didn't have like the 322 on it or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
It was a
was.
subliminal. It was a subliminal one.
Exactly. And they crooked it from the crooks, which I thought was cool to be a part of, like this group. And all of that I kind of realized in hindsight, because when I was younger, I knew about Skull and Bones. I had learned about them from my good friend Amos when I was in college. He and I met on the green, because in between classes I would go to the green and smoke weed. The green is like this center park in the center of New Haven,
Uh-huh.
and there's this whole history connected to it that I started to learn from Amos. And the reason why he was in New Haven was because after he got out of prison in Arizona, he felt like, as a Native American, something that he could do to kind of right his wrongs with his ancestors would be to go and pray to Geronimo. Like something was like calling him, because he had learned about this story that, Prescott Bush came and stole Geronimo's skull and went and took it to Yale. So something just drew him to New Haven. He came to New Haven. And when I met him, he was homeless. He's not homeless anymore. He's got a job, he's got his own place and all that, but he's got a truck. But yeah, my bro Amos, we met. he saw my shirt. I had a shirt that had Sitting Bull on it, and it was like, sure, you can trust the government. Just ask a Native American. And he saw that and liked my shirt, and we started talking. And he told me his story, and then we would just kick it every now and then. He would tell me like all about Skull and Bones, or tell me all about like how this conquistadors had a book this thick that they used to come and take over the South Americas, which goes back to what we were talking about when you were a guest on my show, which is funny that that had come up because I didn't know about that book you showed me, bro. And I've been meaning to bring that to show Amos because I think he'll
Bro,
like it.
that's the shit, bro. That book, I'm telling you, that's what like a lot of conspiracies come from there.
I'm telling you, man, when it comes to this thread, like Amos really put me onto it in a major way. Because I was born on Columbus Day, so like the whole
Oh shit.
Columbus story even kind of connects to my like.
You have a lot of funny. I feel like I meant to say this earlier. You with being with that I was about to say cult, but that sorority. You basically the fraternity. I keep calling it a sorority.
Right.
With the fraternity, you've been fighting the Illuminati because they going against Skull and Bones.
Well, and yeah, that's the weird thing, man. It's like I didn't even know that, and the first thing they said to me when I went to join after my friend had invited me was like, "Are you ready to go down the rabbit hole?" Like I got a text about this. So, and
No
what's funny
way.
is like most of the guys in the frat weren't even like they could
Conspiracy
care less
theories.
about Skull and Bones. They could care less about any of that. They were just there to drink, have fun, and really like at the end of the day, frats like that, the ones that aren't like harassing and like bullying each other, um, it's about like brotherhood. It's about like, learning things that you can only learn from other men, you know. And I'm sure some people will hear that and be like, weird, or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
I think to me, like it taught me a lot of responsibilities as a person, how to live with other people. Cause there was a time when I lived there for a little bit. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm still not perfect. I'll say that. But yeah, it was an interesting thing to run into. And it also gave me a place to like kick back and, when you're that old, you don't want to be up your parents' ass all the time. You want to have your
Yeah,
own place. And I definitely couldn't afford that, so I was able to go and hang out there and feel like I was on my own for a little bit. And now I have my own place, which is awesome. But yeah, yeah, back then it was it was not easy to like get into all this stuff. So it was cool to have a place where I could go and just sit on a couch and read a book and chill and smoke and
nice.
you know
And
get
that's
into
when
all that other
that's when
stuff.
you were chilling with what was the name? Sorry, Atmos? Not
That was
Atmos.
a little bit before that.
Okay,
I
Amos,
met
Amos.
Amos when I was in community college, and then by the time I linked up with the frat, I was already dropped out of community college. I was still friends with Amos, I'm still friends with him now. But but after he got a job and wasn't homeless anymore, you know,
Yeah, he had
I
to do
couldn't
his
just
thing.
like walk downtown and be like, "Yo, where you at?" Like now he's like got shit going on. So, which is good. I'm really happy for him. But we still talk and I'll hit him up every now and then. Me and my girlfriend Tara went and visited him last year. But yeah, when it comes to like the New Haven thing, what's interesting about the frat is I met a guy in the frat who became a good friend of mine. We went and did all kinds of stuff. We worked together. He got me a job at a bakery. And when I started working at this bakery, I was able to learn more about New Haven and Yale. One, because I was driving around at like 4 in the morning. So, like, you're kind of seeing a different side of a city when you're
Yeah,
driving around that early. And also, I was delivering bread to Yale University. So, like, I would go inside of different buildings, I would go to different cafes, and I would drive all over the town and then the state. And and then I would go home like and it was such a fun job because it was just me in the van listening to podcasts, smoking a few blunts, and dropping off bread. And I would see all this interesting stuff in Yale like every now and then because I kind of had like my wits about me, and I knew like, okay, if I have a bag of bread in my hand, I can kind of blend in a little bit and maybe get to places that someone from off the street wouldn't, right? That only students are allowed to go into, or teachers or
Yeah,
faculty, right? So yeah, I took the advantage of that to a certain degree and kind of
I looked
explore.
around a little bit.
Yeah, and I was able to go into the Wolf's Head Lodge, what was formerly the Wolf's Head Lodge, which is another secret society in Yale. A lot of people think it's just Skull and Bones, but there's actually up to 40 different secret societies at Yale. There's 8 original secret societies that are called like the Ancient 8, and they've been around since the 1800s. But the majority of them are from the 1900s, and they're just like they're basically like a club that you would have at any other college. But the main ones are the secret societies, and it's funny because Skull and Bones came up recently in the news, and
Oh yeah,
they're
I haven't
having a
seen.
whole social justice warrior takedown of Skull and Bones, where now they're
Oh
saying
yeah,
the history's racist, which, yeah, obviously, I think that Skull and Bones certainly is racist. It has like an Anglo kind of thing going on, but it's a complicated subject, and it's just interesting to see like them being kind of hypocritical, because it's like it's one thing to be at Yale, but it's another thing to be selected for Skull and Bones and then to turn around and be like, yeah, this is all racist. And it's like,
yeah.
well, you're kind of taking advantage of that, aren't you? Like like I don't know. And it's a little short-sighted too, because if you want to talk about racist, like Yale and all these global corporations that Yale's connected to, they're actively hurting people around the world. It's not even about racism at that point. It's about exploitation, and that's what these institutions do. They exploit, and they'll make it a social commentary, because then no problems get solved. I mean, ask people in the South, in the Black community, how much the civil rights did movement did for them. Like, there were still people in Georgia in the 80s who were like, having all these terrible things happen to them. uh
Yeah, I mean,
and
have you seen that? Did you ever see that Vice documentary? It was like one of the last slaves, but like
yeah,
it was like a guy. It was kind of crazy because it was like he wasn't technically a slave, but it was kind of like he was a slave, and it was just like
yeah, well, and
very,
it shows like how you can have these like isolated like pockets of communities where just
like,
things don't change.
you know what made me think of that the first time? Like, oh shit, like shit could really like you could really get abducted or some shit. Like when like I was like doing deliveries in like the Hamptons and shit, and I was like, oh, there's just like big houses, a bunch of land in between. Like that made me think like, damn, imagine having to run and escape, bro. Like, and then like, you don't know where you're going.
You never know, man. I tend to think that, those big mansions, yeah, they probably hide some crazy stuff. When I was an Amazon delivery driver, I found a bunch of weird stuff,
What was the
like,
craziest shit you seen?
well, one thing that comes to mind is when I was delivering in this kind of wealthy area, this one person had like a giant statue of a Doberman Pinscher dog. And dude, it was all like slate obsidian black, like
Yeah,
black statue, like huge, like the size of a truck. And I was pulling up this driveway, and all of a sudden, before I even see the house, I just see like
this
a
big
huge
ass dog.
dog statue. Yeah, and I didn't even know about like the dog man or anything like that back then. But it just gave me a really weird feeling. And the person who answered the door, except the package, was nice. They seemed like a normal person, but it just, I don't know, it just gave me a weird vibe. Like, and then I learned about like the dog star and like how that's like a thing. And I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a cult that worships the dog man or the dog star,
How
and
big was this statue?
like the size of a truck, dude, like huge.
Yeah.
Like
So
I'm
we're talking
serious.
like what, like 20 feet
Like what you
long,
would see like in New York on Wall Street with that like big bull, like that.
bigger than that?
that size statue, like
Okay.
equivalent to that, like big enough
That's
where
not
you
that bad.
big enough where you walk around and you're like, wow, okay, this is like, you could look up and down and be like, whoa, this is big. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There was another house I went to, and it looked like a house out of a storybook, almost like, I don't know, Harry Potter or something. And there's like a weird goat, and I get out of the van, and this goat just walks up to me. I delivered like 50 packages at once to this person, like 50 packages. And I don't know what it was with this lady, but she had a lot of money and she just seemed weird. And she had a pet goat. She didn't have any dogs. She didn't have any cats. She just had a pet goat. So I don't know. That's weird to me, but who knows? Maybe there's some people who are like, that's not weird. Goats are cool. But, and then the other strange
I mean,
thing is,
that's not that crazy.
yeah, I guess it's not that crazy, but she didn't seem like she was gonna eat the goat. It was like it was her dog. But yeah, the other thing was I went to a mansion with like a gate, drove up a hill, and the name on the package was Chase. So I'm gonna assume that it's the same family that owns Chase Bank, just based on where this house was. But they told me that they had a helipad, and that, well, I noticed the helipad because you could see it when you're driving up the driveway. And I asked them about it, and they're like, "Yeah, the helipad." See, this is the thing. Like, people are afraid to ask. I'm never afraid to ask in those
Yeah.
certain situations. I like to talk to people, especially when I was the Amazon driver, because I'm like, what are they gonna say to me? Like, they don't want to tell me, they won't tell me.
Yeah.
So I asked, like, well, what's up with the helipad? Where are you guys going to so often? And they said, oh yeah, we don't use it that much, but it's convenient, gets us to the airport quickly. And then they were like, into New York City, and then they're like, oh, and also the SWAT team uses it. So I'm like,
The
oh,
SWAT
that's
team.
that's
The
neat.
fuck?
Like, you and the SWAT team are like this, like the Chase banking family has a connection to the SWAT team. What does that tell you?
Interesting.
Yeah, it's not like it was like the mayor or the governor. Like, this is like a, corporate private wealth, and they're like
Yeah.
connected to the government like that. It's just a
I've
little odd.
delivered to a Chase person before. But my craziest fucking delivery story was not craziest, but as far as those lines, like there was one time I delivered I'm pretty sure it was Rothschilds, and bro, it was like in Manhattan, and it's like around 40th Street, around like the towards the east side, and it's like the end of the block. It's the only building there, and it's like a whole courtyard. And then like I was trying to do the delivery, and like somebody just popped up out of nowhere. He's like, "Yeah, I'll take that from you." And that was it.
Uh,
He told me to turn around. I was like, "Oh shit, bro."
I wouldn't doubt that there's something to find over there, but yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like with the Amazon, I didn't snoop around too much. With the Yale delivery job, I felt more comfortable snooping around because I could be like, oh, I got lost. It's like a
yeah,
campus. But at people's houses, I have a respect for, so I wasn't gonna like go crazy like that. But I did deliver to one mansion where they had a creepy fountain statue that just gave me like a weird vibe. It was like, babies and like a naked lady and just
okay,
weird kind of artwork. Another mansion had like a giant, like, perfume bottle right when you walked into it was like like a giant perfume bottle, like the size of like a I don't know, like huge, bro. Like, this house is huge. I think they worked for like, a perfume
yeah.
company.
They
But
had to, cause what the fuck?
yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff like that. One time I got out of my van and there was a bear, a mama bear, and a baby
Oh
bear
shit.
at the end of the driveway, and they were looking into the house to see if the homeowners were home. And then when they saw me, they went around to the other side of the house. But yeah.
I would have just threw them shits down and did, bro.
Well, yeah, I did. I left it in the driveway. I did not want to go up to the doorstep because I thought maybe the bears would be territorial, you know. Maybe they're trying to get into the house and get some food or something. But yeah, just that's kind of more hillbilly rural kind of funny stories like that. I've seen some crazy owls. I never seen any like UFOs or anything like that, but one time I was driving through New Britain, Connecticut, and I looked up in the sky, and I think somebody had like overfilled their Christmas decorations with like helium or something because I saw an inflatable Santa Claus upside down flying through the air, bro, like at least 20 feet over the tree line, like huge,
That's
like
crazy.
just, and I thought it was a UFO at first because I'm like, what's that red thing in the sky? And I look and it's Santa Claus's butt.
Yeah, that's crazy. Let the people know. I mean, I feel like this is a good place to wrap it up right now. Gotta having a little bit of technical difficulties, but let the people know where they can find you and everything. And
Cool, cool. Yeah, thanks for having me, Sonny. It's good to
thank
talk
you.
to you again. Our conversation would be a good place to start. If people are new to my podcast, go and check out my interview with Sunny. We talked about the old world of North and South America and the forbidden history, the stuff they don't want you to know about how America was populated, right? I
Yeah,
mean, this
word.
is a topic that we're both very interested in, and you're going to be putting me in touch with, well, you've already put me in touch with some people that are going to take those topics a little further, which is
Yeah.
cool. So I appreciate you introducing that topic to me. But my family thinks I'm crazy. Search it wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, all the places, and then YouTube if you want to check the video versions of the show. And then from YouTube, just go into that about section and you can find all my links right there.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely gonna have all his links in the description. But just like that, guys, it's been a great episode. Mark, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you, man. You've done a lot for me, and everybody, make sure you go subscribe to Mark on everything. Go follow him on Instagram too. And yo, just my favorite thing, so crazy. It's been this Sunny Talk. I'm your host, Sunny, Mark Steeves, and peace out, guys. All right. Oh, let's stop video. Let's stop the recording again. Oh.